It begins with the image of a child there, unaware and still playing, saying, "I am a mage." "You beast, take my magic," the girl opposite cheerfully replied. "I am the beast. I will tear your mage to pieces." Then the boy raised the wooden staff in his hand into a fighting stance, and he struck it hard against the girl's forehead. The girl winced in pain and angrily shouted, "Why did you hit me for real?" But the boy felt no remorse and brazenly insisted. Beasts should be defeated by mages after all. So the girl demanded, "Then I want to be a mage too." The boy selfishly objected. No, the girl kept arguing. "That can't be." Just then, Rebus approached from behind, smiling kindly and greeting. "You kids are full of energy this morning, aren't you?" The two children responded politely. "Old man Rebus," the boy no nay asked, "how can I become a mage?" He answered honestly, "You can't just decide to be one, kid. A mage is the pinnacle of humanity, occupying the highest social ranks among us. Nobles and knights wielding the mysterious powers passed down from their ancestors. So unfortunately, you children can't become mages." The boy's father standing behind seemed helpless. "What are you telling the children, elder? Is that even true?" Rebus blinked in puzzlement. "What do you mean?" He bluntly explained. "They say a beast has appeared." Rebus said solemnly, "It's true." That left him unsettled. "What?" Rebus quickly explained. "Last night Rob said he saw it at the village gate, its whole body shrouded in pitch darkness. They say it's a leopard the size of a house. But don't worry, the village chief went to the city to invite a mage. He'll surely be brought back, and the beast will be destroyed." The people breathed a sigh of relief. "That's a relief." Then they warned the village children, "Listen up, kids. Don't go into the forest for now." Rebus picked up a branch and reminded them, "Be careful too. If you're not a mage, you can hardly kill such a beast." The boy's father worriedly asked, "Does everyone in the village know?" He casually affirmed, "Of course they do." He asked further, "What about him?" Rebus blinked puzzled. "Who do you mean?" He mentioned, "The guy on Hizaril Hill, up on the hill where the sheep are resting." He explained to Rebus, "That shepherd Turan." Turan was lying on the ground, staring up at the sky, surrounded by the sheep. He thought to himself, bored to death. The scenery was exactly the same. Every day was the same as every other day. He closed his eyes and muttered in annoyance, "At this rate, I'll forget how to talk." Suddenly, he heard someone scold, "You good-for-nothing brat." Rebus leaned on his staff beside him and reproached, "The sun hasn't set yet. You're young and already slacking off, skipping work?" He angrily retorted, "You're blocking the sun, move aside." That made him furious. What insolence! He helplessly asked, "Are you still holding grudges about the old days?" Turan acted unconcerned and asked back, "What old days?" "The matter after your mother's death. You were going to secretly turn the sheep into communal property, weren't you?" His revelation made Rebus uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. He sat up and insisted, "Yes, if that's the case, it's true. I'm petty. I don't have the generosity to share my mother's inheritance. We're not close enough to inquire about each other's health. If you have business here, say it and be gone." Rebus shouted angrily, "You brat." Turan's expression darkened as he demanded, "What?" Rebus composed himself and warned, "A beast has appeared." Turan casually replied, "A beast?" Rebus gently stroked a sheep's head and reported, "They say it's a leopard the size of a house. Rob spotted it and is going to warn the villagers." Turan remarked nonchalantly, "That's a big deal, huh?" He asked worriedly, "Aren't you afraid? Around here you're the easiest target, you know. I don't know what your guts are made of. In any case, the village chief has gone to summon a mage, so be careful. I came here because I'm worried about you." Suddenly Turan cut in, "Adults aren't honest at all. Why not just say you're worried about the flock, not me?" Hit to the core, Rebus shouted angrily, "You insolent brat." Turan smirked and ordered, "Hey old man, say what you need to and get lost. Your mouth stinks so much it's almost deafening my nose." So Rebus had to leave, clutching his anger. Turan's gaze froze. A Ma Thursday is the name for beasts that possess mysterious, magical power. If humans have mages, beasts have Ma Thursday. Because of a Ma Thursday, a mage would come to this rural village? Finally, I'll get to see a mage in person, but a mage summoned by the village chief probably won't be top tier. He grinned excitedly and said, "Anyway, I want to see it for once." In his mind, Turan wondered how strong it could be. And suddenly he smelled something. Turan's eyes froze as he recognized the scent of blood. Dusk slowly fell. Turan walked slowly, somewhat bewildered. This was definitely the right direction. Suddenly he realized something. Turan's steps halted, His gaze went blank toward one spot. Turan saw Rabus's body on the ground and nonchalantly called, "Rabus told me to be careful, and yet you went to sell salt first." He was somewhat astonished that the smell of blood was coming from old Rabus. Then Turan began to conjecture. This wound wasn't caused by a normal wild animal. It must be the work of a Ma Thursday. Suddenly at that moment, Turan also looked up in shock. He saw a monster nearby, towering as it strode toward Turan. He still stood there calmly. The monstrous leopard stepped forward, staring at Turan. Down in the village, the boy asked curiously, "Is the Ma Thursday very strong, father? Can't even adults beat it?" The man quickly replied, "Very strong, yes. An ordinary adult like me would be reduced to bones if they charged at." The boy asked in confusion, "So what will our village do?" The man gently reassured, "Don't worry. The village chief has gone to summon a mage. The mage will destroy the Ma Thursday for us." The boy anxiously asked, "The mage won't lose, right? The mage will teach the Ma Thursday a lesson, won't he?" He nodded affirmatively. "Of course. They are great figures born with magical power. Just one word, and they can slay a Ma Thursday instantly." Turan glanced at the nearby monster, and his lips barely moved. "Die." Then the monstrous leopard was knocked far away. But it didn't die. It only bared its teeth and growled. A strong aura radiated from Turan. He nonchalantly wondered, "Not enough?" While Turan was still stunned, the monstrous leopard surged forward again. He shouted loudly, ordering it to stop. The monstrous leopard backed off to a distance. Turan smirked softly, muttering, "I knew it wouldn't die instantly, but I didn't expect it wouldn't even stop." "Ah!" The monstrous leopard savagely smashed a nearby boulder. It ground its teeth in fury, staring at Turan. He didn't stay still either and bent down slightly. Turan exhaled and steeled himself. If so, he grabbed a stone in his hand. Turan pulled out a shepherd's rope and shouted, "A shepherd must look like a shepherd." At that moment, the monstrous leopard lunged forward. Turan commanded the stone to harden, then used the rope to whip the stone far away. Turan's eyes reflected the image of that stone. Then he swung the rope hard, ordering it to accelerate. Turan's foot lifted slightly to gain momentum. A killing intent flashed, and he shouted, "Pierce!" A powerful beam of force shot forward, aimed squarely at the monstrous leopard. The force beam struck and felled it. Fresh blood spurted everywhere. Turan's force beam still surged powerfully through the air. Then the monstrous leopard fell prone, its mouth wide as it screamed in disbelief. Turan stepped forward quietly, thinking, the target above still has the stone hovering. Just as he shouted, the stone fell, smashing straight onto the monstrous leopard's head. The heavy stone struck, causing a loud explosion. Turan stood silent, watching the smoke before him, completely calm as he watched the monstrous leopard be destroyed, thinking, first time using this on a Ma Thursday. Turan quietly asked himself, should I dump the body in some valley? He clicked his tongue in annoyance, doing good deeds again without any credit for the villagers. His gaze reflected the image of the creature. I am, after all, a mage. I recognized this special talent early, about 8 years ago. Back then, Turan could control objects. On the day I turned 10, I sat on the ground and made things float in the air. Turan excitedly called to his mother. Mom, look, the logs are floating in the air. But his mother said nothing. So Turan called again. Mom, he kept bragging to her. I can make fire and I can command the wind. The memory of that day remains vivid in my mind, unchanged. His mother shouted angrily, stop that right now. It was the first and only time she ever flew into such a rage with me. Turan cried out in surprise. His mother gently took the floating log and called softly, Turan. She sat down beside him and said, come here. Sit down and talk with me for a bit, child. She asked tenderly. You still want to stay by my side for a long time, don't you? Turan sadly nodded and affirmed, yes, ma'am. Hearing that, his mother instructed, then promise me this. Swear that for now on you will never use this power again. She painfully reminded him, and never reveal this power to anyone. Turan couldn't understand and looked up to ask, but why, mother? She calmly answered, do you still remember the stories about the nobility and the knights? He replied naively, I remember. Then Turan began to tell his mother, people who hold this power are collectively called mages, whether they are nobles or knights. Yet the nature of nobles and knights are two completely different extremes. Nobles are descendants of the Freyan divine line. Those gods descended to save humanity in ancient times. Knights, in truth, are descendants of those nobles, but their blood was mixed with mortals. She praised him after hearing this. That's right, you've remembered well. Then his mother began to lecture. That's why people must distinguish between nobles and knights, even though both are mages. I'll explain to you why you must not use this power. Turan, she revealed a shocking secret to him. Because you inherited that ability from your father, a knight. Behind the ramparts of this village are many treacherous nobles. Those nobles always look down on knights as if they were nothing more than slaves. She looked straight at her son's innocent face and warned, "So you must engrave my words on your heart. Absolutely no one must ever know you are a mage." Turan's mother asked softly, "Can you promise me that?" Up to now, 8 long years have passed since that day, and I have always kept the oath I made to my mother. That promise will never be broken. I have no intention of exposing my identity as a mage, nor any intention of leaving this mountain to go down into the world. Turan's eyes slowly opened when suddenly a banging shout came from outside. "Turan, get your face out here." He slowly went out to open the door. A group of people glared at Turan with furious faces. After hearing them speak, Turan yawned tiredly. "So what do you mean?" he calmly asked. "Are you saying I was the one who killed Rebus?" They immediately grabbed his collar, asserting, "Exactly, you are a shameless, brazen killer." An angry man scolded Turan. "You struck down old Rebus, then dumped his body outside as bait for the monsters, didn't you?" After hearing the accusation, he fell silent and said nothing. After a moment of silence, Turan spoke. "I see why you deliberately framed me." They froze and replied, "What?" Turan answered without restraint. "The eldest in the village died alone. Instead of the able-bodied men, too cowardly to face the monster like you. I see clearly why you consider this the best escape for yourselves. I understand why you thought this was the best way out." He smiled and said, "That's a terribly easy way for you to shirk responsibility and pin it all on me." Turan simply leaned back and could avoid a blow. In Turan's mind, he thought, "Magic is truly convenient. As long as I desire something intensely enough, it will instantly become reality. The only cost is mana." Turan whispered, "Fall down." So the person opposite would always end up flat on their face. I don't even need to light a fire. Just a small nudge like this, to make everything look natural, not too conspicuous. Just enough so they don't lose their lives. I'll use pressure to subdue them. As he thought, Turan executed professional punching moves. A series of wooden staffs were knocked up into the air, and so it went for 8 long years. I successfully hid the truth that I was a mage. After dealing with them, Turan lightly dusted off his hands. He sighed calmly and reminded them, "You should have used some of that energy to arrange Rebus's funeral." Then he turned to the women and asked, "Did you all come here to cause trouble too?" The girl hurriedly denied it. "No, we came to see you, Turan." He fell silent, then suggested, "Take this whole pack of idiots off the mountain." Then Turan went inside and took off his shirt. Turan thought to himself, "The street below will certainly be chaotic again. They'll probably use this as an excuse to extort prices whenever I go down to trade. Fine, I can teach them another lesson until they offer a fair price." Thinking that, Turan breathed a sigh of relief. "I gave them a beating they'll remember. They won't dare come back." Suddenly he heard knocking again and snapped irritably. "Again? Are these people crazy?" They kept knocking persistently outside. Turan came out and shouted angrily, "Someone, do you really want to be?" But when he saw the tall man before him, he froze. Turan asked softly, "Who are you?" The man replied awkwardly, "I'm terribly sorry. I thought I might ask a favor for this journey, but it seems I've arrived at a bad time." Turan looked up at him and assessed. "A group of travelers?" Then he spoke. "No, it's fine, I'm sorry. It's just that a few uninvited people showed up and caused some trouble." Turan wondered to himself, "Mother taught me etiquette rules, but is this polite enough? I've never had a proper conversation with anyone in this remote town, so it feels very strange. Besides, a group of guests carrying weapons appeared in this dull little town." Then Turan said, "If you intend to find a place to rest." He sighed. Then Turan offered, "Please come inside." A table laden with food was set out. Turan honestly said, "Our household isn't well off, so I'm afraid there aren't any delicacies to offer guests." Kian replied while eating, "But this already feels like a feast. Anyway, you surprised me a bit. You've never encountered strangers from distant places before?" Turan replied calmly, "Yes, I was born and raised right on this hill. I've lived as a shepherd all my life, and it's very rare for this tiny town to have any travelers visit. While drinking, his gaze suddenly froze. Turan also lifted his cup and drained it. Suddenly, Kian exclaimed, "How interesting." He looked puzzled and asked, "Huh?" He bowed his head and replied slowly, "For someone who grew up here as a shepherd, you are remarkably well-versed in polite manners. Your parents must have raised you strictly." Turan answered honestly, "I learned those things from my mother, but she passed away a few years ago after a serious illness." Kian exclaimed cheerfully, "She raised a son to be proud of. So I'm sure she now rests with the gods in the palace of the heavens. I want to sincerely thank you once more." Turan replied casually, "I'm merely living according to what my mother taught." Then he asked curiously, "But what brought you out to this remote countryside?" Kian smiled and answered, "I was commissioned to handle a matter." He asked, a bit surprised, "A matter?" Then the man explained, "They're looking for someone capable of slaying that black leopard-like monster. I am a mage." At that, Turan's face also froze. He gently said, "Then you must be the mage our village elder mentioned." The man admitted casually, "That's me. May I ask you a question now?" Turan responded promptly, "Please do." Kian probed, "I can strongly sense the presence of a monster in this area, yet I see no trace of any ferocious creature around. Stranger still, you clearly know about the elder and that monster. Yet you remain oddly calm, with no sign of fleeing or hiding. If that monster targets humans, you could well be its prey. Aren't you at all afraid? You seem remarkably brave for a shepherd who's never set foot beyond this town. Who exactly are you?" An answer was uttered. A mage returned to the past. Turan naively asked his mother, "Why can't everyone know I'm a mage, mother?" She replied anxiously, "Because of those rotten nobles out there." He asked further, curious, "Rotten nobles?" His mother explained sadly, "If the nobles were merely shepherds like us, the knights would be no different from the dogs the nobles keep at home. They might treat you with affection like family, but they'd readily sell you or turn you into a sacrifice whenever they see fit. I would never want my child to live a life like that. Turan, you also want to stay by my side, right?" Turan naively answered, "Yes, ma'am." Then she instructed, "So remember this. No one must know that your mother's child is a mage, especially other mages. If they catch wind, they'll separate us and turn you into their hunting hounds, ready to discard you at any time. And to prevent your identity as a mage from being exposed, you may even have to take someone's life yourself." Turan's eyes turned cold and sharp. He wasn't joking about that. After all, things had come to this. Kian struggled to reconcile. "Why are you keeping silent?" He also realized Turan was completely serious. Kian could only force a smile. "That serious look of yours ruins my joke." Only then did Turan's expression relax. He exhaled. "That was just a joke?" He spoke up to apologize. "Forgive me, I'm not very quick with jokes." Kian also stood and came closer. "No, it's my fault. I should apologize for making you uncomfortable." Turan laughed and explained, "It's the first time I've heard a joke about mages, so I was a bit surprised." Kian was courteous as well. "Your reaction was so amusing, I couldn't help teasing you a bit too much." He held out his hand. "I just remembered we haven't properly greeted each other. It's a pleasure to meet you." Kian smiled and introduced himself. "My name is Kian, a lone wanderer." Turan returned the handshake. "How rude of me. I should have introduced myself first." He smiled. "My name is Turan, an ordinary shepherd." They sat down to eat and began a friendly conversation. Turan mentioned, "I'm just 18 this year." Kian replied, "As for me, I've reached 75. Turan was surprised. "You still look robust and much younger than your age." Kian readily explained, "Mages tend to age slowly and live longer than ordinary people." Turan asked curiously, "What made someone like you choose a wanderer's life?" The question made Kian nostalgic. "I decided to leave after 60 years of service to the Arabian family." He recounted, "In these later years, I just want the freedom to travel without being tied down." Turan thought to himself, what a free-spirited and romantic ideal. Their conversation went on, warming Turan. It was pleasant to converse so happily. Kian laughed cheerfully throughout the evening. The atmosphere in the house brought Turan a sense of ease and peace. With such a virtuous man, it was surprising how delightful it felt. They talked until dawn peeked over the mountains outside the window. Kian suddenly realized, "Is it this late already?" Turan smiled. "You're right. I was so absorbed in conversation I didn't notice the sunrise." Kian pushed back his chair. "It's time for me to continue my journey." He pushed a coin across the table. "Take this Arabian silver. It's the purest silver and should more than cover my meal. He pushed a coin across the table. Take this Arabian silver. It's the purest silver and should more than cover my meal. Before leaving, he glanced back fondly. Who knows? I might return a few times to bother you for a meal. The sky brightened over the hill behind town. The sheep contentedly grazed on the vast pasture. Tehran called out loudly, "Gather up." The sheep lifted their heads at the sound and began moving toward him. Tehran rarely felt as relieved as he did today. It was his first time meeting another mage. More importantly, how long had it been since he'd had such a pleasant conversation? He happily stroked a lamb's head. The easy manner and natural humor always shone through the old man's words. He was warmer than any adult Tehran had ever met. That very sunset, Kian appeared at Tehran's door with a wolf slung over his shoulder. "I'm back." Tehran marveled. He truly was an admirable man. He completely changed his prior beliefs. He had thought knights were soulless machines, always used like tools by haughty nobles. How am I supposed to report this to the village chief? On a forest trail, Kian was walking, thinking the land of Israel was now free of monsters. He quietly scanned his surroundings. The fallen, broken trunks reminded Kian of something. Traces of a battle remained, but there was no sign of the monster. He stopped before a large tree whose trunk was split by an embedded stone. Could the monster have been slain? Kian stared at it, pondering. Who would have the skill to hunt it? Or did the village chief secretly hire another mage besides me? He exhaled softly, but in any case, it was a relief, so long as the monster was gone and the people were safe. A gut feeling made Kian's eyes snap open. He suddenly became highly alert. He quickly whipped his head around. The giant beast paw stepped forward slowly, carrying a rank, black stench. Its head had been completely distorted into a grotesque, ugly shape. Yet the terrifying power radiating from this beast was full of menace. Kian froze for a moment. Wait, this is a monster wraith. He recoiled in panic. Who would be so irresponsible as to do this? The beast swiftly raised its paw to strike Kian. Its claw gouged the ground violently. But Kian was lucky and leapt clear. He regained his composure and analyzed the situation. If a monster's corpse isn't absorbed or its mana purified after death, it mutates into a resentful wraith like this. A mage who specializes in hunting monsters would never make such a basic mistake. The beast continued its frenzied assault aimed at Kian. He was baffled. Clearly whoever finished this monster must be a mage, so why would they leave it to become a wraith? Kian wondered. Did they really not know the consequences of leaving that source of mana? No. However green, a novice would know this basic rule. Otherwise, they couldn't have stood against it in the first place. Kian's hand condensed a golden orb of mana. Or does the culprit have some other scheme? Whatever the case, I must destroy it immediately. Mana formed into a sustained beam of light. Kian directed it to attack the beast, but the technique seemed unable to inflict any damage. Kian was stunned by the beast's power. My magic has no effect at all? That means this creature's mana far exceeds my control. He suddenly panicked when all that remained before him was a pool of black water. Where did it go? Kian strained to reason. Is it using mana to counter magic with magic? Where is it? From the shadow behind him, a boiling stream of water erupted. The beast had appeared behind Kian and roared fiercely. It slashed in a way Kian couldn't dodge. His arm was grievously wounded, blood gushing. This was not an opponent an ordinary knight could contend with. At minimum, a low-ranking noble would be needed to stand a chance. Kian was knocked backward, seeming to grow exhausted, his breathing heavy. Unexpectedly, such a high-level wraith had appeared in this remote mountain village. Truly, life teaches you never to expect the unexpected. Unexpectedly, such a high-level wraith had appeared in this remote mountain village. Truly, life teaches you never to expect the unexpected. He bowed his head, his dark eyes full of despair. Kian gritted his teeth. But I will not go down easily. Even if I die, I will drag you into the grave with me. His hand gathered immense mana. I'll concentrate all the remaining magic into my palm and strike directly the moment it charges. The beast also lunged forward at the same time. His expression was resolute. He leapt forward as the beast raised its claws high. At that moment, a colossal surge of magic flew in from elsewhere. It knocked the beast that was about to attack Kian aside. Debris rained down, leaving Kian stunned. The beast had been felled, lying motionless on the ground. With a single strike, the attacker called out, "Are you all right?" Kian smiled faintly and replied, "The shepherd's joke gave me quite a start." He turned to look at Tehran, approaching calmly. Tehran. Kian was surprised. So you're a mage? Tehran admitted. Yes, that's right. Kian asked unexpectedly. Why did you hide it from me before? Silence stretched, and he felt helpless. No. Let me ask this instead. Why did you intervene to save me now? You could easily have walked away without getting involved. Tehran mouthed. Because in the dead of night, at Tehran's house, the wolf lay motionless on the floor. He tilted his head curiously. Why go to such trouble? Kian, puzzled, asked again. What do you mean? Tehran explained. I don't know what the village chief promised you, but I believe with your ability, you could earn much more with ease. Kian laughed heartily. They are truly pitiable. Tehran bowed his head in silence. What's so pitiable about? Kian leaned back comfortably. They live on this frontier, always trembling in fear with no minimal protection. Tehran interrupted. Is that really your responsibility or fault? Kian thought otherwise. He declared. A mage's duty is to inherit the power of the divine. Therefore, we should live with the pride of protecting the lowly people. He closed his eyes and sighed. Perhaps not every mage shares my ideals. Each person has their own thoughts and path. Thinking of that made Tehran smile slightly. He replied calmly. Doesn't everyone have the right to choose their own way of life? The beast recovered its strength and suddenly attacked the two of them. Kian quickly regained his composure and cautioned. Listen to me. This is not something we can face. He was firm. It's the kind of monster you cannot defeat unless you're a noble. Quickly inform the village chief and help everyone evacuate immediately. The beast transformed, revealing eerie green eyes and a leaping body. Kian stood and faced it. I'll stay to hold it off. He watched the beast worriedly, thinking to himself, though I say that bravely, I don't know how much longer I can hold out. Tehran blurted out. It will be fine. He manipulated a rock by the roadside. I believe if the earlier attack hit its mark, everything will be all right. Kian froze. What are you muttering? Tehran's composure made him realize silently. Could it be that the strike just now wasn't the full extent of his power? A young knight, living reclusively on the mountain, yet capable of hunting a wraith that requires noble strength. And indeed, the seasoned knight, Kian, pondered just that. What he was witnessing now was not merely a chance rural encounter. The countless small stones hovering in the air under Tehran's magic were also not the impulsive act of a young knight trying to break from nobility. They all erupted with Tehran at once, amplifying the mana around him considerably. The scene unfolding before him. He smiled. It might very well be the beginning of a mage who will change this world. Tehran replied to Kian. I'm also very curious about my true limits. Kian, hearing this, grew angry. I absolutely won't allow you to act like that. No matter how great your talent, that entity is still an extremely terrifying opponent. He instructed, when the beast raises its claws, we must coordinate together. But before it could strike, Tehran moved first and sent it flying away. Kian finally acknowledged the gap in strength. No, if I rush in now, I'll only be a hindrance. I couldn't even react to that last blow. He withdrew the mana in his hand. At this moment, I can't be of any help. What must be done now? Kian wisely stepped aside to observe Tehran's powerful, erupting mana, allowing Tehran's talent to shine brilliantly. Though Tehran appeared calm outwardly, he seemed to be struggling. Damn it! The jump to dodge the beast attack was still intact, having no effect at all. Kian shouted a warning. You can't finish a wraith with ordinary physical attacks. Tehran retreated out of the beast's attack path and asked, Then how am I supposed to destroy it? With Kian's prompt, use fire. Tehran raised his hand, his eyes lighting up. Kian hesitated, or lightning would also work. A blazing red flame flew in and seared the beast's hide. Tehran frowned in confusion. It still had no effect. Kian loudly, not like that. He fell silent in thought. To impose a mage's power on another living being, establishing the causal rules is the most fundamental prerequisite. Don't tell me he is even ignorant of the most basic knowledge of a mage. Kian suddenly realized. Could it be? He watched Tehran's nimble back evading the beast. Was he the one who killed the monster and left it to become a wraith? Does that mean Tehran has never absorbed mana even once in his life? Kian raised his voice to instruct. Don't just kindle a fire, create it and launch it at him. He couldn't help but be surprised by this power. Has he reached this level of strength already? Tehran stopped fleeing, harnessed mana, and a blazing red flame appeared in his hand. Kian stood aside observing everything. If you're a mage, producing a flame isn't too difficult, but to control it requires specialized training. Turan raised the flame high. It transformed into a colossal blaze. Kian couldn't help exclaiming. He could do that immediately? Turan ran forward swiftly and hurled the blazing orb toward the beast. The great fire quickly engulfed it. Its body burned fiercely as the beast writhed on the ground in agony. Kian shouted, "Maintain focus. You must continuously channel mana so the flame does not die out." With his patient guidance, Turan gradually completed the task. He had to burn away every trace of that wraith's existence. The flickering flame lit his focused eyes. Before long, the beast could no longer struggle. Kian breathed a sigh of relief. "We have one." He was still stunned. It truly was an absurdly powerful wraith. A wraith would normally require at least noble-tier strength to withstand. Kian's pupils contracted, yet he managed to defeat it. Turan turned to Kian and asked, "Is it really over?" The contrast shook him to his core. A shepherd living high on the mountain could accomplish such a miracle. Kian stepped closer. "If you don't want to face another wraith, first absorb mana." Turan asked in confusion, "How do I do that?" Kian instructed, "Imagine you're drawing something deep into your body." Turan raised his hand. "All right." His eyes shut tight as a great stream of mana issued from the beast's body. It gathered under Turan's hand and then flowed into him. His eyes also reflected the beast's power. Now every vein in Turan could feel the boiling mana coursing through his body. The novelty of it jolted him. Kian smiled and explained, "You'll feel a peculiar pleasure. Even witnessing it myself, I still find it hard to believe." He asked again, "So this is truly your first time absorbing mana?" Turan clenched his fist. "Yes." Kian watched his retreating back in thought. After the first awakening, mana reserves grow over the years. The best way to increase power is to kill beasts or other mages and take their mana. He calculated. But this is Turan's first mana absorption, yet his spell control is so refined. This indicates his innate potential belongs to a wholly different tier. Kian finally realized, meaning this young man is. He spoke, "Turan." Turan looked up. "Yes? What is it?" Kian solemnly bowed in salute. "I was very rude to you. May I be so bold as to ask which family you belong to?" Turan hesitated. Kian replied with respect, "Please." Turan glanced at the bloodied arm and admonished, "Wipe the blood off yourself first." After returning, Kian had his wounds bandaged as well. He repeated once more, "Please forgive my disrespect. To have someone noble like you meddle in these matters, I can only offer my sincere apologies." Turan replied angrily, "I've told you many times I'm not noble. I'm just a shepherd. I don't even know who my father was." He frowned. "So please don't take that tone with me." Kian relented. All right, don't look at me like that." He asked, "But why would a powerful mage choose shepherding? I mean no disrespect, yet this work seems utterly unfit for you." Turan recalled, "It was my mother's wish. She told me to live like this until she passed away." Kian murmured, "Your mother's wish?" Turan repeated his mother's admonition. "Down at the foot of the mountain, there are only scheming nobles. If your identity as a mage is revealed, they'll use you and discard you without mercy." Kian showed regret. She was indeed a wise woman. Turan was also surprised. "I'm a bit surprised. I thought you might call that parental overprotection." Kian replied, "Your mother wasn't entirely wrong." He bowed his head, face sorrowful. Mages hold great power, and great power always brings disputes. Just over 20 years ago, a fierce great war erupted between the major houses. Kian's memories were full of grief. It was the battle between the Arabian clan, which I once served devotedly, and the great House Sahar. Countless lives were lost in that war. He recounted, of roughly 3,000 Arabian knights at the time, over 900 perished. Nearly 1/3 of them fell. Turan was extremely interested in Kian's story. Bitterly so. Everyone close to me was among that fated third. Turan was deeply engaged with Kian's tale. Bitterly so. All my loved ones were among that doomed third. He recalled in sorrow his brother Denver, who always dreamed of opening a laundry after the smoke cleared. Masterman, who sternly taught me because I still had many flaws to learn from, and even my beloved wife and son. They were all slaughtered by House Sahar. I alone survived. Kian fell silent. That is why your mother was right in one respect. A knight's life can be senselessly fleeting and more fragile than a commoner's, he cautioned. However, there's one thing she misjudged: your innate talent. Turan asked curiously. My innate talent? Kian scratched his head. It's embarrassing to admit in this miserable state, but I was a rather capable knight. Yet you could easily destroy that aberrant wraith, something even I couldn't overcome. He assessed. Your potential isn't confined to a normal knight's level. At minimum, you've already touched noble rank. Kian glanced at Turan. And among them you certainly belong to the upper tier in aptitude. Turan spoke up. My mother said my father was a knight. Could that have been a lie? Kian amused. In rare cases, a child of lesser aptitude can be born into a noble family, or conversely, a child with noble talent can be born into a knightly family. Seeing it that way, I think it's best you leave this hill to venture out and explore the wide world. Turan was surprised. Why is that? Kian answered in good faith. Because humanity desperately needs more talented nobles and knights. We have not yet fully dominated this world. He pondered and recounted ancient tales. Other races rejected by the gods still lurk, waiting for an opportunity to rise again. Kian's tone grew angry. And amid that backdrop, the nobles are busy fighting each other for power. The door opened slightly. That is why this age craves strong, compassionate nobles like. Before leaving, Kian asked, above all, you don't feel satisfied with this dull life of shepherding, do you? The question made Turan fall silent for a moment. His silhouette briefly revealed loneliness. What can I achieve at the foot of that mountain? Kian had no perfect answer. That depends entirely on what you desire. He smiled kindly. Wealth, fame, status, family, or genuine friendships, whatever it is, it's extremely hard to find here, isn't it? Kian turned and reminded him. Just imagine, you could be a righteous hero like me, slaying the monsters that threaten the people. He left with a final suggestion. Or become an explorer setting foot on unknown lands, or even be adopted by a house and walk the path of power and rivalry. What then? Turan ran after Kian to the door, hearing him analyze. I think what you say makes sense. He stood, facing Kian. That would certainly be much more interesting than shepherding here year after year. Turan gave a wry smile. For the first time in my life, I'm actually curious about the world beyond. Kian's encouragement seemed to have an effect. Still, I'm worried I might be planting unfounded expectations in you. I'll support whatever path you choose. He suddenly remembered. Right? What exactly is your bloodline ability? I should have asked this from the start, but Turan looked puzzled. What's a bloodline ability? Kian bowed his head. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting you aren't well versed in magic. He explained. A bloodline ability is a trait nobles inherit from their ancestors. Among the Freyan, possessing a bloodline ability is the dividing line between nobles and knights. Kian raised a hand and produced a sample flame. Is there any spell that feels particularly easy and natural to you? Or an innate ability you have without relying on magic? Turan clenched his hand, guessing. Isn't it that I'm very strong? Kian answered. Simply having mana is usually enough to boost a mage's physical strength. Turan recalled his body. I have a very keen sense of smell, and I'm fairly good at throwing stones. Kian then speculated. If your sense of smell is unusually acute, that could count as a bloodline ability. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. And pinpoint accuracy with ranged weapons is one of the marks of the Arabion house. However, that's also a fairly common trait. Kian asked with interest. Keep going, tell me more. Turan nodded. All right. After a while of talking, Kian concluded. I understand. Turan asked anxiously. What's wrong with you? He couldn't hide his curiosity at Kian's serious expression. Why do you suddenly look like that? Kian said. I think I've realized which house your abilities most closely resemble. Turan tilted his head. Which house is that? Kian had kept his head bowed the whole time. A renowned great house. He recalled that house's savagery and his own past pain, known by the title of trackers or master hunters. Those who suffered losses from war were the Zahar house, the very ones who once faced House Arabion head-on. Turan was stunned and couldn't believe the words he heard. House Zahar. Cold sweat ran down his face, and his eyes repeated the name in shock. House Zahar, great. Thinking this, Turan swallowed and covertly glanced at Kian beside him. Was he saying he shared a bloodline with his enemy? He pressed his lips together. His thoughts became tangled. What should I say to him? Should I apologize? But these are relatives I've never met. Strangers, really. Suddenly Kian called Turan. He quickly replied, Senior. Before Tehran could respond, Kian patted his shoulder lightly in consolation. Don't be so worried. You weren't involved in that war. Even so, Tehran still felt very uneasy. But Kian offered a slightly relieved smile and advised, That's adult business. If blood is repaid with blood, grievances will never end. Hearing this, Tehran suddenly asked, Don't you feel any regret? Kian's eyes flickered. Then he asked back, Regret about what? A gentle breeze blew through, carrying his weighty words about urging me down a mountain. Kian lowered his gaze slightly and explained in a low voice, If you go down the mountain and pursue power, sooner or later you will join House Sahar. After all, you are very talented. But I believe in your character. Kian's words surprised Tehran. What do you mean? He raised his head and looked at him with full trust. I'm speaking of your honesty. You saved me and even revealed an identity you've spent your life hiding. Conversely, if someone like you joined House Sahar and rose to a high position, perhaps you could prevent such a brutal war from happening again. The more Tehran listened, the more pensive he became, remaining silent. Seeing this, Kian lifted his foot and stepped past him. Before leaving, he offered sincere counsel. Well, you don't need to think about it so gravely. After all, you haven't decided whether to join House Sahar yet. Seeing this, Kian lifted his foot and stepped past him. Before leaving, he offered sincere counsel. Well, you don't need to think about it so gravely. After all, you haven't decided whether to join House Sahar yet. He gave a small smile and turned to Kian. I want to try going down the mountain. Kian heard this and laughed with satisfaction. It's good that you think that. But Tehran added, Just not right now. He stood facing Kian and calmly said, I'll come down the mountain after your wounds have fully healed. This moved him deeply. How kind of you. I'm only slightly scratched. Truly, you are a very good person. After a while, inside the warm wooden house, Kian grew serious and explained, To use magic, you must have mana. That's why mana is often called the universal key. Tehran, sitting opposite, repeated curiously, The universal key? Kian's solemn voice responded, It's not entirely an all-powerful force as its name suggests. But to use magic you need a corresponding amount of mana. Tehran asked in confusion, What is the standard for having mana appropriate to a spell? He calmly added, I'll explain it right now. Saying that, he held up 3 fingers. The difficulty of a spell is largely determined by 3 factors. First is bloodline, second is affinity, and third is the law of cause and effect. Kian then explained each point to Tehran. First, bloodline is determined by the blood you carry at birth. This applies to most nobles who are not knights. For example, it's very difficult for you to heal my wounds with magic, isn't it? He replied, That's right. In Kian's mind a land appeared, and he continued, But for the Revista bloodline from the south, that's something they can do even without training. That is power derived from bloodline. Tehran lowered his eyes to his palm and asked, What about the second factor, affinity? Kian continued, You can also think of it as familiarity. It's the idea that a mage can perform actions more easily with what they like or are accustomed to. Tehran then understood, like how I form a fireball as if I'm throwing a stone. Seeing this, he stood up satisfied. Exactly. Perhaps if you simply created a flame, you wouldn't achieve that speed or destructive power. And the final factor is the most important, the law of cause and effect. Even I do not fully understand it. At this, Kian suddenly posed a question. What would happen if you intentionally used mana to kill me directly? Tehran, puzzled, answered honestly, Perhaps a few sparks would flash from my head, and that's it. As he spoke, he reached out and cast magic on the cup on the table. That's precisely the phenomenon caused by the absence of the law of cause and effect, which makes the spell fail. Under the dancing current of electricity, bubbles like boiling water gradually appeared inside the previously empty cup. When there is no appropriate cause for a desired result, and the target is overly difficult to achieve, that is when this law takes effect. After hearing and watching, Tehran seemed to have absorbed it. I think I somewhat understand the law of cause and effect now. Saying that, he calmly launched a small flame at the boiling cup. If I wanted to kill you, instead of wasting mana hoping for death, I need to create a cause that leads to death. For example, creating and firing a flame, right? Because producing a fire and launching it looks more natural than directly burning someone. Kian's eyes lit up as if he discovered a treasure. Exactly. You could have been a scholar instead of a mage. Turan withdrew his magic, rubbed his chin, and murmured, but I can command ordinary animals at will. So why do magical beasts need such conditions? Kian shrugged casually and explained, because of their mana reserves. After that they discussed for a long time inside the wooden house. Long afterward, Turan finally broke into a sweat and sighed softly. Magic really isn't easy, is it? Immediately Kian's stern tone sounded. An outstanding mage not only knows how to use mana, but must also understand the principles and circumstances behind it. He looked up at him and asked, now that I think about it, does House Sahar have any special magic? Kian paused briefly, then answered plainly, they're very skilled at hiding and tracking. Then he suggested, let's try it once. Hearing this, Turan quickly rose from his chair. All right. He squeezed his eyes shut and silently chanted in his mind, I don't want others to see me. I wish no sounds or scents would be detected. Immediately, part of his body began to turn into a white smoke. Not seeing Kian's astonished face, Turan hesitated and asked, is it working? Before him, there was no longer his form, only a faint ripple blending into the air. A few seconds later, Kian came to his senses and replied, you did it. I can't see you anymore. At that, he couldn't help but swallow soft, because in that moment the space before him was completely empty. Not even a ripple remained. But in an instant, Turan gradually reappeared in his original spot. Kian looked at him and spoke, his tone betraying astonishment. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it's still a terrifying ability. In battle, the Arabian knights feared that power most of all. Turan fell silent for a moment and sighed. This seems like a ridiculously powerful ability, almost unfair. However, Kian did not entirely agree. But remember, it's not invincible. He didn't continue the subject and quickly turned to leave. Now I'll teach you some magic training methods. Kian's actions made Turan even more puzzled. Is he teaching too much to a mage of the enemy house? But he simply said gently, you saved my life and even healed me. Haven't I already said? Kian lowered his eyes, placed a hand over his chest, and said with conviction, I trust your character. Some time later, when the village chief heard the news, his face twisted and he shouted angrily, what? You're going to sell the flock and leave. He glared at Turan, who was packing a travel bundle, and scolded, so who will herd the sheep from now on? How can you decide this on your own without consulting us? Hearing this, he retorted angrily with his eyes closed, go find your own shepherd. What I do with my property is none of your business. His successive threats made the villagers cower in fear. Anyway, I hope you'll buy the flock back at a fair price. Otherwise, I'll release them and leave alone. You can try to catch them, but it'll be quite a task. One villager, worried, quietly called out, Chief. He was now gritting his teeth, silently calculating. This bastard is the sort who follows through on his words. Provoking him won't gain us anything. In the end, the village chief had to relent and handed Turan a pouch of coins. All right, I understand. Leave or stay. Do as you wish. After that, he left the village together with Kian. Turan suddenly frowned as if remembering something and said, I just remembered. The villagers still owe you compensation after everything that happened. Should I go claim it? Kian simply smiled lightly as if unconcerned and replied, I never intended to take it. And you were the one who caught the magical beast, weren't you? Hearing that, he no longer cared. All right then now. Turan paused briefly, looked at the two roads branching ahead, and added, we part ways here. Before departing, Kian cast him a regretful glance. I'm sorry I refused to travel with you. I feel more comfortable as a lone traveler. Turan shrugged and smiled comfortably in response. No problem. Thank you for everything. He closed his eyes and said softly in farewell, Turan, take care. Turan beamed and promised, yes, I hope we can meet again with smiles on our faces. And so the boy stood watching as Kian's figure receded for a very long time. Only later did he understand why he disliked Kian addressing him so formally. Although he had never lacked his mother's love, deep inside the boy always longed for the image of a father. Someone who could be an ideal model of the brave man the boy would become. Time passed, and messy footprints stretched across the sand. All around was a desolate, empty desert, with only the wind whining through the giant rocks. In the distance, a hooded figure was gradually approaching. That figure was none other than Turan. Suddenly, he widened his eyes as if he'd discovered something. Not far from Turan, a group of people were slowly walking toward him. Were they caravans traveling from village to village? Turan couldn't help but feel quietly relieved. That's good. Quickly, he stepped forward alone to meet them. Let's go ask for directions. The leader saw this and demanded, Who are you to block our way? Turan immediately explained honestly and asked, I'm traveling alone. May I ask the way to the nearest city? They answered, If you follow the road we just came from, you'll find a city called Muriai. Their attitude made him somewhat puzzled, but he calmly replied, I understand. As he spoke, Turan slowly walked past them. Thank you very much for the directions. But someone suddenly stepped forward to block him. Wait. He sneered cruelly and asked, You got the information and now you're leaving just like that? Turan was stunned. What? However, he quickly regained his composure, a murderous light slowly flickering in his eyes. So what? The man, unaware, continued to demand. If someone helps you, you should at least return the favor a little. Before he finished, the men around drew their daggers and surrounded Turan. First, put down that bulging pouch. He glanced around and understood the situation at once. A highway robbery? The man who had blocked him earlier arrogantly sneered. So what if we're robbers? The leader rested his long sword on his shoulder and curled his lip with contempt. Call it stupidity if you like. This is abandoned land. It's not surprising if someone meets their end here, right? He then pointed the tip of his blade at Turan's throat and threatened. Drop your pouch and cloak while we're still being merciful. Killing you first and stripping you afterward would be bloody and much more trouble. But to his surprise, Turan merely replied calmly and composedly, I understand. So highwaymen here might even kill without remorse. At that moment, Kian's earlier lesson rushed through his mind, especially when he grasped the third factor, the law of cause and effect, and everything else Kian had taught him afterward. Turan curled the corner of his mouth, eyeing the bandits like moving sandbags. I'll just use you as targets to practice on. His gaze suddenly halted, puzzled by the laughter. The gang's boss sneered with disdain. This lunatic talks as if he's a mage. An underling eagerly chimed in. That's right, boss. Pale fingers flicked out a gust of air. Turan swung his arm broadly behind him, forming a whirlwind that scattered them all. He pulled back his hood to reveal his sharp eyes. So instead of generating wind from the air, shaping it with your hands, and amplifying it wastes far less mana. Turan pondered seriously. He hadn't known he could produce such strong gusts with so little mana. Meanwhile, the others were beginning to scramble up. What the hell is happening? He calmly opened the cap of a water flask, and the droplets suddenly transformed into sharp darts. Under his control, they all aimed in the same direction. One of the bandits went white with fear as the projectiles embedded in him and drove him backward. Turan spread his palm, ready to receive an attack. This should be a useful spell when there's a lot of water around. Honestly, throwing those stones by hand felt even quicker and stronger. The gang leader, terrified, hastily begged, We didn't know you were a skilled mage. Please, have mercy and spare us this time. While he spoke to distract him, the others lunged forward. We'll hand over anything you want. Please, we're begging you. Be merciful and spare our lives. Turan decisively lifted one foot to the proper height. He stomped hard, and a surge of sand behind him swept over the bandits. The leader watched with a pale face. Impossible. Turan looked down with a terrifying expression. Have they all perished? His voice then rose slowly. Let me ask you something. Hunch there. The man answered politely. Yes, great mage. I'll answer whatever you wish to ask. Turan stared at him and asked directly. Why did you dare attack me without any plan? Even if I were just a lone traveler, I might still be a mage like now. The leader's voice faltered. Because you bowed to us? At that, Turan's pupils tightened. The man still had his head bowed, sweating. Even when we used coarse words, you still bowed and greeted us politely, so we assumed you were merely a weak, ordinary man. Turan's face turned icy and expressionless. Thanks a lot. That taught me a very useful lesson. Hearing this, the gang leader looked up hopeful and delighted. So you'll keep your word and spare me, right? But what he didn't expect was a transforming droplet appearing right above his head. Cut to a moment with Kian speaking calmly. Turan, from now on you'll meet many people out there. There's one thing I must thoroughly warn you about. Turan held the prepared backpack in his lap and listened intently. Kian continued, Never show any mercy to scum like highway robbers. They never hesitate to harm others to seize whatever money they can. A sharp sword lay quietly on the table. The reason I must warn you so sternly is because. At that moment, he answered very seriously, I think I understand the reason now. Turan now stood before the motionless corpse of the gang leader. Because the life you spare out of weak compassion could come back to directly harm 10 innocent people around you. He stood there coolly muttering, I've dawdled here long enough. Turan walked carefully over the sand, following the wheel tracks along the road where merchants and ruffians had dragged their wagon. Heavy wheel ruts were clearly cut into the layers of sand. He continued alone, marching along the trail. The thought seemed engraved deep within Turan's mind. His lips pressed together as he kept moving forward without looking back. I've killed someone. The terrified expression of the gang leader suddenly flashed back. He felt guilty, but he really couldn't just let them go easily. Kian's warning resurfaced vividly in his mind. He also remembered the moment the bandits tried to ambush from behind. Those who would ruthlessly rob and kill without hesitation for profit would certainly target other villagers again whenever they wished. Suddenly his boots stopped at a borderline. The wheel tracks in the desert gradually faded as grass shoots grew to cover them. Turan's chaotic heart began to calm as he recalled Kian's teachings. He paused, looking up at the clear blue sky, then continued stepping into a wholly new world. His gaze scanned and he exclaimed. He had come upon a place that looked grand and bustling. So this is it, the small town Murray. On the road, a mother held her daughter's hand. With his backpack, Turan walked into the place curiously. It was the first time in his life he'd seen so many people gathered so closely together. A towering, sturdy building rose here. Even the architectural lines were completely different from those in the small village before. Turan walked slowly through the town, constantly observing but saying nothing. Now it truly felt like he had arrived in a real city. He now stood before a fruit stall. May I ask you something? The vendor cheerfully replied. Oh, hello. The vendor then directly asked his need. What would you like to buy? Turan politely raised a hand. Actually, I'm not here to buy anything. Kian's advice came to mind again. If you arrive in a city and need a place to rest, find it nearby. Whether in a village or a city, there's usually an inn available. At that, the vendor, annoyed, waved him off. If you're not buying fruit, then get out of my sight. Turan fell silent, unable to understand the vendor's attitude. Why was he suddenly so rude? Was there an unspoken rule in towns like this that you must buy fruit before you're allowed to ask questions? Thinking that, Turan pointed at a red fruit. How much is this? The vendor answered curtly. 2 dupit coins. Turan calmly counted a few coins in his palm. 2 dupit coins? The vendor remained rude. You look like an outsider, so you probably don't know what that is, right? You can pay with other currency if you prefer. Turan moved to place a coin in the vendor's hand. Where can I find an inn? The vendor readily gave detailed directions. Go straight down the road behind the cloak shop, then turn left. You'll certainly see a building with a blue roof and a wooden sign hanging outside with 3 characters. That's the largest inn in the whole town. A pretty girl appeared in the inn. Welcome to our inn. The inn staff introduced herself as Lena. Upon seeing Turan, she unexpectedly complimented him. You're quite a handsome guest. He smiled with relief. How much for one night? Lena, cheerful, quoted a price as she greeted him. 16 dupit coins. Upon hearing it, he replied, I'll take it. Turan handed a small pouch of coins toward her. More importantly, he had something he urgently wanted to ask. Lena received him gently. What would you like to ask? Without beating around the bush, Turan asked. Are there any monsters around here with bounties on them? Lena paused slightly at the word. Monsters? His gaze was firm and his expression serious as he waited for an answer. He needed to start hunting monsters and find a way to absorb as much mana from them as possible. He'd also heard that monster hunting could earn money. Unable to wait, Turan naively asked, Why won't you answer me? Lena laughed and tilted her head. Sir, she raised her left hand. Nothing in this world is completely free, you know? Are those sealed boxes over in the corner of the town hall? Turan sat at the table, holding a cup of water. What's that? Lena looked at him surprised. You don't know about the town hall? You really are a country bumpkin. Turan sat quietly and listened as she explained. The town hall is where many affairs are handled, government matters. The officials who work there are hired directly by the city's lord. Lena looked at him and said, It's probably closed now. The sun has fully set. If you want to look for monster bounties, go to the town hall tomorrow. Lena stood opposite him with one hand on her hip. So you're a monster hunter too? Are you? Turan sat up straight and asked calmly. What is a monster hunter? They said a muscular body could withstand tremendous energy. Rumor has it that if an ordinary person kills a monster, they will surely become a mage. You want to become a mage quickly, don't you? Lena focused on the conversation. Of course, only a fool would believe such superstition. Suddenly a hand was placed on his shoulder from behind. Superstition? A man with blonde hair appeared behind him. It's true that someone can become a mage by slaying monsters. I saw it with my own eyes. And his name was the monster hunter Medan. Lena noticed his arrival and asked, Medan, you're still alive? Medan looked nonchalant. I told you, I won't die until I become the first mage. Tehran raised his arm to gesture at him. Medan withdrew his hand and laughed aloud. Oh, how rude of me. Tehran took the chance to ask seriously for more information. More importantly, can I hear more about what you just said? Medan looked him square in the eye and replied that it was possible to become a skilled mage by slaying monsters. Lena sat at the table, idly holding her cup, listening to their conversation. Mages grow stronger when they hunt monsters. By the same principle, if an ordinary person kills a monster, they can become a mage themselves. Medan glanced at the 4 other men behind him. The 4 of us are out hunting monsters to become mages. One of them crossed his arms confidently. That's right, exactly. Tehran, a little surprised and serious, looked at them. So what does that mean, someone here is already a mage? They answered immediately. No way. In this town, there's only the Lord's mage and 3 others under him. Medan spoke casually and laughed. But you said you've hunted monsters before, and with your gear you're underprepared. Don't you have any weapon at all? Tehran pulled an item out before them. I do. Medan recognized it at once. Is it a slingshot? Just look at how worn it is. You've clearly used it many times. Tehran was serious in the tense conversation. Yes, I have it. It's suitable for shooting something about the size of an egg very fast. Medan rubbed his chin and studied the slingshot. With that weapon, you could easily hunt monsters like rabbits or foxes. Tehran blinked in surprise as the man looked at him. Actually, we were just saying we need another ranged shooter. Are you interested in hunting with our group? At the time, Tehran answered offhandedly to finish the matter. No. But that night, lying on the bed, there was no real reason for him to go out hunting with. He looked a bit hollow and utterly tired. Today was truly a chaotic day. The backpack he carried was placed neatly beside the bed. He still couldn't really believe he had decisively left that village. Tehran raised his palm and idly toyed with a little mana. What will happen next from now on? His ears suddenly twitched as it caught a sound. Tehran reflexively sat up and looked toward the door. Who is it? He recalled walking the barren road with Kian. Even in an inn like this, he shouldn't let his guard down, right? Kian had walked beside him with his hand in his coat pocket and affirmed, That's right. Kian looked at him kindly and smiled slightly. A city doesn't automatically guarantee safety. Hearing that, he replied, I understand. He continued to warn Tehran to be careful. So never let your guard down. He obeyed dutifully. Understood. Tehran moved closer to the door, one hand already channeling mana. The room door eased open a little for him to peer out. His expression remained unchanged. Lena appeared at the doorway with a smile. Is that Lena? She asked softly. Are you asleep yet? Then she added her reason. I thought the room looked rather cold, so I wanted to warm it up for you. Tehran was a bit surprised. What? Lena put on a coy expression as she looked at him, fiddling with the bow on her chest. What do you mean by that? She stood there hesitantly at the door, still flustered. Literally what I said. Tehran stood with his legs apart, still not understanding what she meant by literally. Lena moved closer, making an offer. For a little money, I'll do anything you want. Tehran, still clear-headed, replied firmly. What if I don't want anything? She deliberately pressed in with her alluring body, teasing, Don't lie. You don't need me to tell. I can tell just by looking at your face. Unexpectedly, Tehran squeezed his eyes shut, his expression compassionate like a Buddha's face. Lena was suddenly speechless, only able to stare with wide eyes. Kian's stern, angry face appeared in his mind. No. Tehran stood frozen, confused by Kian's expression. Always be careful with inmaids and prostitutes. Most of them carry venereal diseases. He listened seriously to Kian's admonition. We may have good resistance, but if you slip up during relations, you could infect a woman. Don't let desire make you do something you'll regret. Lena, now flushed with anger, stomped down the stairs. Cities really aren't easy, are they? From the fruit seller incident to Lena herself. Tehran turned back and lay on his side in bed. Even small bits of information or a little story had to be paid for. The city truly was rather cold. His eyes turned toward the direction of a sound. Hey, I have something to ask. One of Dan's followers asked. Why did you want to recruit that kid earlier? He doesn't look very useful. Turan forced a thin smile, his face looking rather sad. Yeah, that's true. His attitude's rude. He looks like bait for predators. But suddenly his eyes widened when he heard Dan say, seeing him reminds me of my youth. Watching him go hunting with that kind of weapon really worries me. Dan walked on, smiling kindly. With me around, maybe he'll live a little longer. The beast hunter Dan. The followers could only accept it. He was just too kind by nature. Because of that, Turan let a satisfied smile appear on his lips. Well then, Turan folded his hands behind his head and stared at the ceiling. The city wasn't as cold as he'd thought. Cut to the next day, as sunlight fell on the town hall. A man at the reception desk flipped through a stack of documents. Hello. What can I do for you? Turan approached politely and asked carefully. Are you an official here? The receptionist answered immediately. Do I look like one? He didn't beat around the bush and got straight to the point. I'm here to hunt beasts. The receptionist tilted his head, a bit surprised. Beasts? Kian's gentle words appeared in his mind again. Life won't be kind to you. At that moment, he had asked why. Kian sat on a rock, stroking the sheep's wool. Because there's no reason for it to be kind. If you want people to treat you well, it's simple. The receptionist handed a sheet of paper to Turan. As soon as he took it, he was instructed, don't take this outside. Return it after you read it. Turan looked at the crudely drawn black crow on the paper. Is this the monster? The man snapped back. Do you think that's a cat? The receptionist continued flipping through documents. Unlikely, but if you kill a monster, bring it into the city. If a mage doesn't reclaim its mana, it can become an undead. He repeatedly warned him. If you kill a monster and leave it, city law punishes it harshly, up to death. Turan studied the papers and listened. I understand. The ferocious, misshapen monsters replayed in his head. I know what happens if a monster turns into an undead. I must not repeat the same mistake. Turan deliberately asked, don't the knights hunt monsters? The man didn't even look up, just kept writing. Do you think those fellows have nothing better to do? He pushed the paper with the crow information across the table. The knight's role is to maintain security in the city. Turan wanted to confirm. So, I have to hunt monsters outside the city? After getting the answer, Turan turned and left. That's the work for rough hands like you. When the receptionist mouthed something and then looked up, he realized. You left? There's about to be another corpse outside the city. One, I was milky white, with no pupil visible amid the jet black feathers. A black crow lay dying, having just taken a deep wound to its chest. Everyone at the town hall who saw it went pale. Impossible. That's it then. The receptionist and two others peered intently at the brooding crow. You brought it back this fast? Turan stood quietly beside them as the man asked. Did you catch it by yourself? He showed no particular expression and answered softly. Yes. Turan immediately asked straight for what he wanted. Where's the reward? A chubby-looking fellow hurried to the desk. Of course you'll get it. They put a small pouch of coins into his hand. You must be tired. Go rest. He took it and replied, Thank you. After he left, the three of them stood around the crow discussing. Amazing. The wing is still intact. Is it really possible to bring a crow back in this condition? The receptionist's gaze flicked as if something had caught his attention. He still noticed Turan's presence there. Oh, you're not gone yet? Turan nonchalantly asked further. Are there any other monsters worth hunting? He broke into a sweat in surprise. What? He stood in the sunlight, unscathed and very comfortable. Could he really go out hunting again? A feast of delicious dishes was laid out. This is the most expensive item on our tavern's menu. Lena sighed with relief after setting a pile of good food on the table. I can't believe you hunted 30 monsters in 3 days. Turan found it ordinary. It's nothing special. Turan calmly enjoyed the meal. You must have earned a lot. Turan opened his eyes and said seriously, It's not just about the money. As he defeated the small monsters, he drained their mana. More precisely, it was the monster's mana he targeted, and that definitely made him much stronger. Turan stared thoughtfully at his palm. His mana had increased several times since he met Kian. His pupils did not flicker as he stared, but he felt he was nearing his limit. Relying only on the mana of weak monsters would likely make further growth difficult. Turan suddenly spoke up. Hey. Lena jumped and answered immediately. Yes? He casually asked. Nobody stole any of his food, right? Lena, standing beside him, was certain. You ate it all by yourself. She tilted her head in surprised praise. You look so thin, but you sure can eat. The inn's cook wiped his brow with a towel. It's been a long time since someone ate a meal like this. I'm delighted you did. Tehran rose from his chair and nodded at the food. It was really good. The man cheerfully promised. Next time I'll cook even better. Suddenly a hand shot forward and grabbed his hat. Another arrogant fellow appeared from behind. Eating well all by yourself? Eh? Tehran remained silent at first, not bothering to look back. You scrawny runt. Making money these days, huh? Before the man's words finished, he ate a straight slap to the face, shared among his group a bit. He staggered, stumbling backward. Ew. One of his cronies outside cursed. You bastard. Tehran tilted his head slightly. Just wanted to share a little. The bully, angry, threw a wild punch. Don't get cocky. Tehran stood his ground and used his elbow to block the punch. As that man fell, another from behind rushed in swinging a chair. He only needed his bare hands to knock the chair away. The man's pupils rolled upward and saw Tehran's hand poised to flick his forehead. When the blow landed, it sent the man flipping backward onto his back. Outside, Lena ground her teeth. Stop. She angrily covered her face and shouted, No fighting in my tavern. Medan appeared and bowed politely. Sorry. Sincerely sorry. Tehran stood motionless before the bow and said, I've punished you both. Don't let this happen again. He remained bowed and explained, We've been having a hard time lately. That's why. Seeing you do well made us jealous. Then Medan signaled, Apologize now. The two, frightened, bowed and said sorry. Tehran looked at him seriously and asked, Are you having a hard time? Medan dodged his gaze. Money's a bit tight. He began to explain the situation while his hands remained idle. We have about 3 days before we can't pay the rent, but that's our problem. Tehran directly produced a pouch of coins and held it out. Here, take it. Medan looked up in surprise. Why? Tehran explained calmly. This is thanks for your kindness the other day, inviting me along. Medan was the one surprised to hear that. How did you know? Tehran cut in with a solemn face. It's not a freebie. Tehran wanted something in return, so he offered, Share some information with me. Medan laughed and tapped his chest, confident. I'm very confident in information. I'll tell you everything I know. The city returned to its peace. At first, Tehran stood alone on a high spot. This is probably my last hunt in this city. He looked around and thought, Medan's given me info on the next city. It's almost time to move on. In the inn, the two sat opposite each other talking for a long time. There was more useful information than he'd expected. No matter how he looked at him, Medan was truly a good man. In his memory, Medan remained a radiant man. He wasn't as mature as Kian, but he was purer and kinder. Suddenly, his gaze went stunned by something. His sharp nose was so keen it detected a strange scent coming. This smell was... Tehran suddenly leaped quickly into the depths of the forest, hoping his hunch was wrong. His pale hand pressed against the trunk of a tree. Tehran stood still in a quiet space of the forest. Before him lay a body slain beneath a tree. This person was Shirley, the man fidgeting with blood on him, whom he recognized. Wasn't he one of Medan's companions? A smirk creased his mouth when he saw the man. The man's eye had gone ashen. Beside his motionless hand lay a few small coins. Tehran sat down closer to him, curiosity rising. What on earth happened here? Medan. He could only fall silent as he glanced over and saw another person slumped beneath a nearby tree. The man there looked near death, but his mouth still whispered. Rabbit. Two long front teeth glinted in the darkness. A rabbit. Tehran looked over and saw a rabbit monster gnawing at a corpse. It had white fur, and its mouth was slick with fresh blood. Tehran studied it carefully and then slowly rose to his feet. Its eyes were bloodshot. It had just leapt and ripped off a chunk of the tree trunk. Tehran ground his teeth, surprised. That was fast. The rabbit monster's ears pricked sharp. He almost took a hit. Tehran took out his slingshot and spun it in his hand. He widened his eyes and focused with all his strength. Tehran swung the slingshot hard. Several small stones shot toward the rabbit at astonishing speed. It was so quick and agile that it dodged them all. Seeing its movement, Tehran treated it with serious caution. This kid is used to defending against thrown projectiles. One of its legs, with 3 sharp claws, was coiled to strike. It lunged at him with astonishing speed, its bloodshot pupils fixed unwaveringly on a single target. For a moment, it vanished from the air as if a puff of smoke had swallowed it. The rabbit monster landed after missing its target. Tehran used the moment from behind to draw a small, sharp knife. A stab just beneath its neck made it scream in pain. Turan quickly withdrew and backed away. His body retreated toward a tree, but seemed to be dissolving. The rabbit monster turned and attacked that tree. Its face looked ferocious as it repeatedly slashed with its claws. Its eyes flared with savagery. Wherever it leapt, it tore at the air. White smoke suddenly rose from the forest. The rabbit monster stood amid a wreck of trees and howled at the sky. Blood trickled from its body down to the ground, bit by bit. Its ears drooped, and its tongue lolled out past its teeth. His black shoes reappeared on the soil. Turan returned to find the rabbit monster's corpse sprawled on the ground. As usual, he extended his palm toward it. His face was cold as he drained all the mana from the rabbit monster's body. A blue light shone in his eyes. The mana he absorbed was notably more than from the first beast. His gaze softened back to normal. Impossible. The person leaning against a tree murmured, "Are you a mage?" Turan didn't hide it and answered at once, "Yeah, that's right." The man remained curious. "Why did you reveal your identity?" Turan didn't hide it and answered at once, "Yeah, that's right." The man remained curious. "Why did you reveal your identity?" And even me, Dan, was lying in a pool of blood with vacant eyes. "Brother." In Turan's memory, he still recalled me, Dan's smiling face. "There's a great city called Orum lately. They have a place called a library there." Turan was surprised by the idea of a library. He affirmed, "I heard they have thousands of books there." Me, Dan said, as if reading him, "You perk up whenever you hear about books, don't you?" He replied seriously, "Did I give myself away?" Me, Dan picked up the cup on the table, smiling gently. "But I heard that library isn't open to everyone." Taking the chance, Turan asked, "Then how can one get in?" Me, Dan didn't hesitate to tell him, "It seems only mages are allowed in." Hearing that, Turan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I see." Though in the forest, his mind kept returning to the conversation. "I've made up my mind." "What have you decided?" Now Turan stood before 3 makeshift graves. "I'll go to the great city, Orum, you mentioned." His face looked a little sad and his eyes glistened. "Meet Dan." Then he had no choice but to leave with one last line. "I hope you find happiness there." Cut to Turan, standing silently in a long line. His face was a bit grimy from arriving in another city. He'd been amazed by the small town Mare. Now he felt embarrassed thinking back. This place was even more grand and bustling. The great city of Orum. He followed the crowd, step by step, through the city gate into the metropolis. So many people wanted in. His gaze fell on several soldiers guarding the gate. Were they screening for wanted people? Turan slowly approached in his turn. Indeed, a major city with a much more organized system. Suddenly a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Stop." Turan didn't understand and turned, bewildered. "What's the matter?" The gate guard, arrogant-faced, pointed at him. "You cannot enter." Turan touched his clothes as he listened. "I've never seen someone so filthy. You should go over there and dust yourself off before entering." Inside the city stood a towering building surrounded by many varieties of trees. Turan, small and standing at its base, looked up in wonder. This was the library me, Dan had mentioned. He couldn't stop marveling inwardly. Imposing. It must be built by magic. Turan cautiously approached the gate and wanted to ask, "Excuse me, may I ask?" The guard at the library gate answered seriously, "Yes." He stepped closer and said, "I want to enter." Kinya stated the condition. "This library is for mages only." Turan immediately asserted himself. "I am a mage." The guard didn't believe him and stepped forward to probe. "What?" He furrowed his brow and scolded him. "You dare claim to be a mage? Do you want to die? There's every kind of madman around." Kinya even made a pushing gesture as if to shoo Turan away. "Someone like you being a mage is absurd." The guard's hand, not yet touching Turan, suddenly flared red. Kian appeared in his memory once more. Mages can recognize one another. They can sense another's mana and tell if that person is stronger than them. His gaze suddenly sharpened. Just from the sensation in that man's palm, his eyes flared bloodshot. The man was affected and struggled to close one eye. He was forced backward by the pressure. "Are you all right?" "I'm Fina." Kinya's head was still touching the ground, eyes wide in shock. "This is not an ordinary mage. This person is at least noble rank or higher." He stood, yawned, and said, "I am Kinya, a knight of House Bantis. May I ask which house you come from?" Turan stayed calm, not wanting to answer. "Is it mandatory to say to be allowed in?" He then replied respectfully, "No, sir." Kinya bowed his head. His eyes darkened. "But use of the library today requires permission from the master of Bantis." Tehran still didn't fully understand. You mean, Kenya promptly took action. I will contact House Bantis immediately. Meanwhile, Tehran was bathing. Very well. One of his eyes opened in exasperation. He thought it would be simpler. A maid with blonde hair appeared there as well. His long arm was being carefully wiped. Tehran sat in the bath while the maids washed him. How did it come to this? He suddenly turned and ordered them, "Stop." They all startled. "Yes, sir." Tehran wanted privacy and intentionally asked them to leave. "Is there a problem if I bathe alone?" The maids answered timidly. "If we don't serve the noble properly, we will be punished." In this vast manor city, he had to accept it. "As you wish." They complied. "Thank you, sir." A maid with cool brown hair exclaimed, "Wonderful." A voice rang out that made her start and hurriedly cover her mouth. "What's wrong?" Tehran was carefully tidying the back of his hair after putting on a new suit. "Is something on my face?" The brown-haired maid explained. "Perhaps the young miss was overwhelmed by your beauty, my lord." The other maids bowed. "Please forgive us, my lord." Tehran responded kindly and gently. "There's nothing to forgive." They immediately said, "Please do not be modest with us, my lord." His gaze suddenly swung toward a direction where a sound had come from. "What is it?" From another direction, someone with pink hair entered the room. Azella appeared with a sharp look and a sultry face. "Is this the guest who arrived in rags?" She curled a mocking smile. "After a bath and fresh clothes, he looks no different from a prince." Tehran paid some attention to her words. "Hey, that beggar remark is provocative." He introduced himself. "I'm Tehran." She did likewise. "I'm Azella." She wanted to know more about his background. "Which house are you from?" Tehran politely declined. "I have reasons not to disclose it." Azella lightly stroked her chin. "Is that so? What a pity." A mysterious smile spread across her face. "He wants to hide his identity? Then let's provoke him a bit." No sooner said than done. She released a wave of mana around her body. Her face looked excited as she faced Tehran. "Show me. Let's see what your mana is like." Tehran's eyes widened as an invisible pressure bore down from all sides. So heavy he realized immediately this was no joke, but a real challenge. His eyes instantly shifted to a brilliant blue. His own mana erupted, spreading throughout the space in response. The air grew thick and heavy, almost suffocating. Azella's guards immediately lunged forward to shield the maidservants behind them. The two streams of power collided violently, making the whole room tremble as if about to split. Then Tehran exhaled. The pressure dissolved the moment Azella let go, and her hand trembled noticeably. "Oh my!" On the surface she remained composed, but her gaze held him deeply as she spoke. "Hey, guest, would you marry me?" Time seemed to stop. Tehran stood dumbstruck, eyes wide, his mind completely blank. Azella suddenly burst into loud laughter. "What kind of reaction is that?" "I was only joking a little." She leaned in with a mischievous smile and continued. "But you should take it seriously once. My seat next to me is empty right now." Having said that, she turned and left, leaving the space strangely silent. Tehran remained standing in place, glancing down at his hand. Only now did he realize his hand was trembling in waves. He thought to himself, "She's at least on par with me. Is this level normal around here?" Suddenly, this great city seemed much more dangerous in his eyes. A while later, in the city lord's study, the man sitting on the high chair observed him calmly and then spoke. A while later, in the city lord's study, the man on the high seat observed him calmly and said, "Welcome, young nobleman. You must know my name already. Rug Bantao, Lord of Orum." Tehran answered briefly, "I am Tehran." The lord blinked. His tone shifted slightly. "Tehran, straightforward indeed. So you want access to the library, right? Many people come here because of strange rumors. So let me say this first. Inside there are no ancient forbidden magics, no secret mana-boosting techniques, no hidden treasures, and no shortcuts either." Tehran replied without hesitation, "I don't need those things, so you don't need to worry." A moment of silence passed, and the lord nodded. "If you still want to enter, then I won't stop you. After all, nothing inside relates to the family's secrets." He glanced outside and said, "It's late now. Rest today and come back tomorrow, okay?" Tehran answered politely, "I will not forget your kindness." The next day, the tower rose straight up as if trying to pierce the sky. The guards respectfully stepped aside and announced, "Access cards have been verified. Welcome to the Horizon Library." The giant doors opened, light pouring in, and for the first time since arriving in Orum, Turan's composure shattered. His eyes widened in amazement at a sight beyond imagination. The interior space did not resemble reality. Spiral staircases stretched upward endlessly, so tall they almost vanished into the clouds. Turan stood silent for a long while, thinking, this is not a building, but a monument to knowledge. Suddenly, a sweet voice rang out. Pleased to meet you, Turan. He looked down and saw a small girl beaming. I'm a librarian here. By the Lord's order, I'll explain the rules. They are actually very simple. Turan stared, secretly surprised. A child is the librarian? But the girl continued confidently. Rule 1. If you damage a book, you must pay for it. Rule 2. Do not take books outside the library. And while you use the library, I will always be watching you. Turan hesitated and asked, all right, but could you stand a little farther away when I read? The girl just smiled brightly and did not answer. He carefully asked on, if you're the librarian here, you've surely read all the books here, right? The girl nodded excitedly. Yes, finding what you need is my specialty. What are you looking for? Romantic love stories or history? Or, since you're young, maybe you want something a bit more stimulating. Over there are some adult books. Turan looked at her intently and replied immediately. I just want to learn more about the basic knowledge of this world. The girl placed a stack of books on the table. Many books here are hundreds of years old and might not suit what you're looking for. But this section should help you somewhat. Thanks a lot, kid. You're welcome. Turan carefully picked up the book, his fingers sliding across the cover, thinking to himself, this is the first time I've held knowledge instead of a weapon. No battlefield, no blood, only paper and ink. How extraordinary. The following days passed like a dream. Turan built a daily routine, waking up in the Horizon Library and reading until the sun set. The following days passed like a dream. Turan built a daily routine, waking up in the Horizon Library and reading until the sun set. From geography, races, wizard rituals, manufacturing methods, ancient monsters to the relics of the old empire. Piece by piece, the blank void around him gradually took shape. The world became clearer, sharper, and more real with every page. One day, the Lord summoned him and praised. I've heard you're making good use of the library. Turan replied tersely, yes. The Lord's tone deepened. You understand that allowing you to use the library and treating you like a noble is already a favor, right? Now it's time I ask for a return on that favor. Turan answered immediately. Please tell me. The Lord recounted how the monster in the north attacked the merchants. The 4 knights sent were all devoured by it, and currently the family can only muster 2 nobles. If you join to make a party of 3, it will be much safer. Turan kept a calm exterior, thinking to himself, protecting others is something a mage should do. I agree. A question flickered through his mind. Mages usually don't get involved in matters like this. The Lord emphasized, the northern road is an important trade route. It has been blocked for 10 days now, so we must clear it as soon as possible. Hearing that, Turan suddenly realized, 10 days ago? So it happened even before I arrived. No wonder he let me into the library so easily. On the journey north, Azella walked between Turan and Marvin, with the knights forming a line behind them. She clicked her tongue and remarked softly, my father certainly knows how to handle things, even drafting guests to hunt monsters with him. She glanced sideways, half joking, half serious. Or are we really that untrustworthy? Turan thought, knowledge is never free. It's just wrapped more nicely. Azella turned to him. Oh, I didn't mean anything by that. Guest, I'm just saying my father is overdoing it. Marvin laughed. Calling the Lord overdramatic is a bit unfair, sister. Azella rolled her eyes. Come on, don't go defending him. Marvin stepped up to Turan and gave a slight bow. First official meeting, right? I'm Marvin Voltas. Pleased to work with you. Turan replied briefly. Likewise. As the group continued toward the monster's last known location, Azella listlessly kicked obstacles out of the way. I just want to finish this quickly and go rest. Marvin slowly approached him and asked, Turan, do you have feelings for my sister? Turan was startled by the question. Huh? Absolutely not. Marvin smiled knowingly. Well, that's a relief then. Ahead, a knight shouted for them to stop, pointing at a cart destroyed by the monster. The group quickly moved in to inspect. Was it this monster? Probably. Our side had already forbidden travel north, so the victim was likely attacked while traveling south from the north. Turan pondered and examined everything carefully. The hidden hand on that wooden structure gave him a clue. The monster we're looking for is most likely a monkey. Azella was surprised. A monkey? Look at the handprint here. It seems it attacked the merchant caravan and then returned to the forest. I think if we follow the remaining tracks, we can pursue it. Azella frowned. Track it? I'm not very familiar with that kind of magic. What about Marvin? I'm not very good at this either. Is there anyone among the knights? Tehran stepped forward and interrupted. Let me try. Azella smiled teasingly. Oh, are you from a line that can do that? I've just used it a lot, so I'm familiar with it. He smelled the discarded cloth carefully and activated a scan. Tehran's eyes widened as a streak of blue energy appeared, stretching into the forest. Follow this direction. It followed it to a lake. Tehran noted, the trail breaks off in this area. It must have used something, Azella asked in astonishment. A beast that actually knows how to hide to avoid tracking? No, probably it was just acting on instinct. Suddenly, the scent became unusually strong. He turned and shouted back. A giant gorilla burst out of the bushes. It roared threateningly before lunging to attack. But contrary to the knight's expectations, it didn't engage in close combat. It scooped up a handful of rubble nearby and hurled it. The knights' faces drained of color in panic. Oh no, watch out. The powerful throw easily swept away the line of knights in front. Tehran jumped to one side, dodging it all. But when he looked at Azella and Marvin, he froze, because both were using the knights as meat shields for themselves. Azella tossed a soldier backward like a broken shield. A thought crossed Tehran's mind from long ago. Mother really wasn't wrong. Azella shouted orders. All attack. The remaining able-bodied knights charged forward quickly, but the gorilla turned and fled instead of continuing the fight. Azella and Marvin gave chase right behind, but their speed was clearly no match. Hurry up, don't let it escape. Suddenly, from behind, a stone sliced through the air toward the beast. It flew through the crowded ranks with unerring accuracy, like a bullet from a sniper rifle. It pierced the gorilla's chest easily, even felling the monster without breaking a sweat. Both of them turned to look at him with faces mixed with astonishment and alarm. In that dust-choked land, only Tehran was seen swinging his crude sling with absolute concentration. He tilted his head slightly with a faint smile, as if it were no effort at all. The gorilla collapsed, panting in pain with each breath. Azella immediately launched the finishing blow. Watch this. A serpent of fire quickly wrapped around her arm. It lunged at the gorilla before them and engulfed everything in fierce flames. The area exploded, a towering column of fire shooting up to the sky with terrifying heat. From afar, Tehran watched quietly and recognized it as the Voltas family's fire guardian bloodline power. As the dust gradually cleared, the knights breathed sighs of relief. Azella straightened, a half-proud, half-exhilarated smile on her lips. When that huge rock flew at us, my heart almost jumped out of my chest. Maven immediately smirked, eyes sparkling with teasing. Oh, scared enough to get goosebumps? Proud little lady. Azella spun around, pointing at her brother. Shut your mouth. You're the one who screamed like a girl. Maven stammered in protest. I was just surprised. While everyone slowly recovered, bandaging wounds, Tehran stood quietly at a distance observing the whole chaotic scene. Blood splattered on the ground, the groans of the wounded, the charred scent of fire magic still lingering in the air. He thought to himself, luckily no one died, but this situation is really not right. Although the beast's ambush was sudden, this was a battle that could have avoided severe casualties. With mana-augmented bodies, both Azella and Marvin should possess stamina and speed far superior to ordinary knights. Yet at the most dangerous moment, they did not hesitate to use those weaker than them as shields. That action was cold and utterly at odds with the noble image he had imagined. A feeling of discomfort crept into Tehran's chest, but he only shook his head slightly when Maven noticed his gaze and asked, "Is something wrong?" Tehran replied curtly, "Nothing." Azella slapped her hands together, the clap cutting through the air, her voice suddenly brimming with excitement. "Come on, stop sulking. The most important thing now is to absorb mana from this monster's corpse." The three stepped up to the still smoldering carcass and all reached out their hands. Pale blue lights immediately radiated from the monster's body, carrying pure energy back into theirs. Tehran distinctly felt warm waves of mana flooding his meridians, just like what he'd read in books. Even with several people absorbing at once, the growth effect did not diminish. The theory was completely correct. A few minutes later, Azella groaned in frustration and withdrew her hand. Damn it, I've hit the limit again. This damned growth cap. Maven also sighed and shook his head. I'm full too. Azella clicked her tongue and glanced at Tehran with a look of both admiration and envy. Now I understand why Father insisted on bringing him along. His magical skill is really impressive. His mana capacity rivals mine, yet he hasn't even touched his growth limit. He's a monster. On the long road back, Maven suddenly spoke up with a sincere tone. Looking back, if it weren't for you today, we'd surely have failed miserably. From tracking the trail, discovering it cleaned itself to hide traces, to the sling throw that unbalanced it. It's all thanks to you. Tehran shook his head lightly, modestly. It was just luck, nothing special. If anything regrettable happened, it was my delayed reaction. I didn't expect the monster to have a detection ability to sense enemies from afar. Maven widened his eyes. A detection ability? Yes, Tehran explained slowly. From what I've read, some monsters awaken special abilities tied to prominent physical traits. This one has unusually large hands and abnormally big eyes. Those traits likely let it throw rocks with tremendous force and spot targets from far away in the jungle. Maven gaped at Tehran as if looking at another kind of monster. You analyzed that so fast in an instant. Tehran shrugged calmly. I only read about it in the Encyclopedia of Monsters in the library. Maven immediately made a face. The library, one of those scholar places? Nobody bothers with it. I once poked my head in out of curiosity, but the books were so dense, I gave up before finishing half a volume. Tehran smiled faintly. Next time you two should ask the librarian. She'll find easier to understand books for you. Azella blinked, puzzled. A librarian? That cursed library actually has someone like that. The scene shifted to the moment Tehran entered the Horizon Library after returning from a hunt. A clear, cheerful voice suddenly called out, "Welcome back, Tehran." He immediately stiffened, a faint smile appearing on his lips. I made a big mistake. In this city, no knight or commoner dares address a noble by bare name. They always use your grace, honor guest, or sir. More importantly, the petite girl standing before him did not look like a typical librarian at all. Tehran asked bluntly, his voice colder than intended. "What do you know my name?" The girl blinked in surprise. "Oh, that." She sat on the table and giggled. "You just realized now?" "Obviously. From the library pass, of course. Within the library's bounds, my gaze can reach every nook. Your name is right there on that thin sheet." Tehran was silent for a moment, then asked further, "So what should I call you?" She shrugged, her tone playful. "I don't have a real name. Call me whatever you like. How about darling? It's cute." She winked and pressed a hand to her cheek in a mock-shy gesture. Tehran cut in at once. "All right, then call you the little librarian." "Oomph." She pouted in mock offense. "So cold. Oomph. You've had me running errands fetching books for days. Now that you know my identity, you suddenly pretend to be polite." Tehran replied immediately. "I never used you, and don't get so close to me like that. It makes me uncomfortable." Tehran tilted his head in curiosity. "Are you a mage from the ancient empire, little librarian?" She shook her head, a mysterious smile forming. "No, I'm not even human. I'm closer to a spirit." Then she explained slowly, her voice gentle like a fairy tale. When a soul enters a living being, it becomes a living spirit. But when it enters something neither alive nor dead, it is simply a soul. This library is my body. The human form you see is just a convenient way to communicate, reflecting the preferences of whoever sees me. She winked teasingly. "Your tastes say a lot about you." Tehran immediately cut her off. "Don't talk nonsense." She giggled. "I'm like an image reflected on water. You can see me clearly, but you can never truly touch me." To confirm, Tehran reached out toward her. His hand passed right through her body like through smoke. The girl looked at him with a strange expression. "Don't do that. It feels weird." Tehran quickly withdrew his hand. She grumbled, arms crossed. "What I hate most is not being able to deal with intruders in the library myself. If I could, I'd have taught them a lesson long ago for taking books out without returning them." Tehran suddenly realized something important. Even the Voltas householder doesn't know you exist, right? Probably no one in this library has ever known either. She nodded as if reading his thoughts. "Because until now, no one has been qualified to perceive my existence. My creator reached a limit. Only those whose form achieves a certain degree of perfection can see me. And as far as I know, you're the only one." She tilted her head playfully. Kind of romantic, isn't it? Turan asked at once. What do you mean by form? Mages often call it lineage. He took a deep breath and asked, Can you tell me about my lineage? You should ask your parents about that. Turan answered softly, his voice low. Unfortunately, I'm an orphan. She paused for a moment and then smiled. Then let me check directly. If you allow me to examine your body. Turan froze, his mind cutting off for an instant. Examine my body. But before he could react, her small hand passed straight through his chest. He jerked and cried out. Ah, she laughed brightly. Done. Now you and I are connected. Don't say strange things. It's not painful at all. After a few seconds of probing, she withdrew her hand and reported. Most of your lineage consists of two main components, pursuit and predation, characteristic of House Sahar, right? Turan nodded. She continued, but there's another lineage mixed in. You are the result of parents who carried two different bloodlines. So what is the other bloodline? She shook her head regretfully. It's sealed. Being born with a sealed bloodline from the fusion of two lineages isn't unusual. When you become stronger, the seal will break on its own and it will reveal itself. Turan quietly nodded, though the mystery lingered in his mind. Afterward, he unconsciously thought of his mother. She had always been too refined, too learned to be just an ordinary commoner. Perhaps she once came from some noble family, but the bloodline had been diluted to the point it could no longer sustain man. He shook his head, brushed the thought away, then turned to thank her. She smiled mischievously, her eyes sparkling. If you're truly grateful, stay another month. Since learning the librarian's true nature, everything changed completely. Instead of quietly reading alone, Turan kept peppering her with questions, demanding deeper explanations of every detail. Amazingly, she not only had mastery of every book still on the shelves, but also remembered the contents of volumes stolen or lost thousands of years ago, like a living archive of ancient knowledge. Under her guidance, he began to see the world through an entirely new lens. Countless invisible substances surrounding us could be observed by making water hover as a lens. Disease was not a curse, but caused by tiny organisms invisible to the naked eye. Decay happened because they consumed living matter bit by bit. Light refracted, heat generated from friction, wounds healed according to clear natural laws. All of it went far beyond the standard magical theory mages were taught. Turan immediately experimented. He placed a ripe red apple on the table and focused on applying the knowledge of decomposition. With just a light touch, the apple blackened from the inside and rotted rapidly as if time had been sped up 100-fold. The librarian tilted her head and asked, How does it feel? Turan couldn't hide his astonishment. It's amazing. It's not that current magic can't achieve something similar, but understanding the underlying principle let me get identical results while using far less mana. A single shift in perspective elevated his magecraft to a new level. But immediately after, a cold thought crept into his head. The great houses likely deliberately monopolized this knowledge. If every mage grasped the basic principles, the elite's advantage would vanish. No wonder the general standard of the world keeps declining. The librarian spoke softly, her tone low. I'm beginning to understand why. Finally, Turan declared, It's time for me to go. The little librarian's eyes widened in genuine surprise. He explained, It seemed the owner here had started to gently push him out. Suddenly, she panicked and dashed forward, shouting, Don't leave me behind. But her body passed straight through him, and she fell limply to the floor. Turan calmly asked, Can you leave the library? She sat sprawled on the floor, head bowed. No. Then stay forever. Cook, tell stories, anything. Turan shook his head. No, I won't. She pouted, knowing well he wouldn't stay. Before he stepped out, she counseled him. This land is full of remnants of the gods. Ancient relics are scattered everywhere. If you search, you may find spirits who know even more than I do. Turan turned and smiled. I promise I'll come back to visit you from time to time. She shrugged, feigning indifference. It's up to you. But her eyes shimmered, clearly trying to hide her feelings. Turan smiled to reassure her. After all, there's still countless books here I haven't finished reading. Leaving the city of Orum, Turan walked alone along the long, empty road. From the continental map found in the library, he learned that House Zahar's territory lay to the east, between vast, harsh deserts. That would be his next destination. If he went there, Turan might find clues about his parents. The sun gradually set, dyeing the sky with brilliant oranges mixed with deep crimson. After some walking, Turan stopped in a quiet corner, sat down to breathe evenly, and told himself, "There's no need to rush. If those clues had vanished, they would have gone missing 18 years ago. If they still exist, they won't disappear just because I'm a little late." The next day, Turan set out again. On the road eastward, he came across corpses scattered along the path, dried blood splattered, the faint stench of death in the air. Despite the gruesome scene, Turan did not let it distract him. Suddenly, a neigh sounded from ahead. Immediately, he slipped behind some thick bushes and watched carefully. Before him lay a man, unmoving on the ground, seriously wounded. Beside him, a blazing red horse, standing proudly, as if guarding its master. Suddenly, the horse lunged forward at terrifying speed, charging the two figures standing opposite. Turan squinted, thinking, it has reins, so it wasn't attacked by a monster. Is this horse protecting its master? Turan's gaze sharpened as he assessed the situation. An attack from that direction? The two attackers revealed themselves clearly. They were dark elves. One snarled and cursed. Damn it! How can an animal be this strong? The other chuckled softly. Find an opening and break through. You think it's that easy? Observing more closely, Turan immediately perceived their true nature. Both began to concentrate their power, a wicked, dark energy spreading forward. Suddenly, the corpses strewn around began to twitch and contort grotesquely, then rose to their feet. They had been reanimated into disgusting monsters, obeying their master's command. Seeing that horrific sight, Turan recalled a passage from a book. This was the Dark Elves' corpse-summoning ritual he had read about in the library. He hesitated for a moment. Should he step in to help? Perhaps that man had attacked the Dark Elves first. The thought conflicted in Turan's mind. He kept watching, eyes fixed on the battlefield, weighing his next move carefully. One Dark Elf bent over a corpse and casually began tearing and biting with a twisted voice. "Whose hand is this? Give it to me." The other didn't bother to look up and replied, "Have your share. Surely you found something too, didn't you?" Turan narrowed his eyes, thinking, so they're cannibals. Wasting no more time, Turan immediately activated his concealment ability. His entire presence vanished from every sense. At the same time, the second Dark Elf continued to grumble with disgust. "We only kill men. Rotten meat for us." Suddenly, an invisible strike hit with terrifying force. The Dark Elf was torn apart before he could react. The others stood frozen, not understanding what had just happened before his eyes. No attacker, no warning, only instant death. But he quickly regained his composure and roared, "Everyone, gather around me." Immediately, all the reanimated corpses surged forward, forming a protective circle around him. Another invisible strike rushed in. This time, a monster leapt out to block the attack. Its sturdy horn knocked Turan's stone aside. The Dark Elf ground his teeth and screamed in fury. "Which bastard is hiding there? Show yourself." He ordered the beast to charge and ram everything away, but then realized, is this one using a stealth skill? His face darkened. He summoned another monster, snarling, "Let's see how long you can keep hiding." His face darkened. He summoned another monster, snarling, "Let's see how long you can keep hiding." As it touched him, Turan's concealment began to flicker, and his form gradually reappeared. The Dark Elf immediately fixed his gaze on Turan, a savage, triumphant grin. "Found you, you bastard." He ordered at once, "All of you, charge. Kill him for me." The monsters lunged at Turan from every direction. He concentrated at once. Fierce flames gathered in his palm, growing ever brighter and hotter. He thrust forward, engulfing two of the monsters in a ferocious blaze. But directly ahead, the giant crawling beast seemed unfazed, charging like an armored tank. Turan leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding being crushed, almost flattened by it. He gritted his teeth. Must hurry. Good thing I killed one earlier. But when he looked back, Turan realized the situation was worse than he had expected. A fox had bitten into his leg, blood gushing out. He shoved it away with all his strength, creating a brief opening. But before he could catch his breath, the mad ox charged again at terrifying speed. Before Turan could fully react, the horrific impact sent him flying backward, slamming into a large tree trunk. Turan's whole body ached. Internal injuries were severe and blood gushed out, leaving him barely able to stand. The Dark Elf laughed savagely upon seeing this. "Serves you right. Dare kill my kind? You'll kneel and beg for death." At that moment, The red horse suddenly charged back. It struck the dark elf in the face with a powerful kick, sending him sprawling to the ground. Taken by surprise and humiliated, he panicked and shouted, "Save me quick!" Immediately, all the summoned monsters stopped attacking Tehran and turned to protect their master. The dark elf roared in anger. "How dare you humiliate me like this? I'll kill you all." But before he could act, another sharp strike came down. A fatal blow pierced his head, ending him in a single breath. When the dark elf died, all his summoned monsters collapsed and instantly vanished into nothingness. The battlefield fell eerily silent. Tehran forced himself to stand, his body exhausted and blood non-stop. He panted in utter fatigue, thinking, "Looks like I'm about to die." Tehran's body collapsed. His legs were too weak to support him. The horse slowly stepped closer. Tehran gently reached out to stroke its muzzle and whispered, "That's right. Thank you." The scene shifted to late night, the air wrapped in quiet. Tehran sat by a small fire, opposite the man who had just regained consciousness. At first he flinched, slightly afraid. "Huh? This is..." Tehran spoke calmly. "You're finally awake." The blond young man looked at Tehran bewildered. "Who are you? I saw you being attacked by dark elves and came to help." Hearing that, he turned to his horse and gently stroked. Tehran observed the horse and remarked, "It's really smart. It even knew to protect its master and lead him to a safer place." The young man nodded, voice full of gratitude. "I sincerely thank you for saving my life. I am Aziz of the Burr clan." Turin replied, "I am Turin." After a moment of silence, Tehran looked at Aziz and asked, "Was there any reason you were in conflict with the Dark Elves?" Aziz bowed his head and answered slowly, "A reason? No. I was on a pilgrimage with my retinue when we were suddenly attacked for no reason. I had heard other races could be violent, but I didn't expect it to be like this." His voice began to tremble, the suppressed pain exploding into tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm sorry. The people I lost today meant a lot to me." Tehran asked softly, "Were they your relatives?" Aziz shook his head. "They were knights and followers traveling with me, but in truth they raised me since I was young." Tehran watched him quietly, thinking, "He's a kind person. This grief is genuine and can't be faked." After a while, Tehran asked, "How many dark elves attacked you?" "I think it was just those two," Aziz replied. "You said you killed two, right?" Tehran nodded slightly. He activated his detection ability in his mind. His senses expanded, scanning the entire surrounding area. After a few seconds, Tehran confirmed, "Yes, there really weren't any others around." After a moment of silence, Aziz looked at Tehran and politely asked, "Tehran, do you have anywhere urgent to be right now? I'm also on a pilgrimage, just like you." Aziz studied Tehran in surprise for a moment, then asked, "Even being that strong, you still go on a pilgrimage? Are you the son of some great house? But why travel alone?" Tehran replied vaguely, "That's hard to explain in detail. And actually I'm not that strong." He continued calmly, "I only killed one thanks to an ambush and a surprise attack. The other almost killed me. If it weren't for your red horse, I wouldn't have one." As soon as he finished speaking, a strange phenomenon occurred. A faint blue energy began to emanate from Tehran's body and spread outward. At the same time, a blazing red aura flared from Aziz. The two energies lightly collided in the space between them, creating an invisible pressure. Aziz observed Tehran more closely and thought, "He's not truly powerful. If he hadn't absorbed the Dark Elf's mana earlier, he'd probably be even weaker now. He's no match for those two dark mages. So how did he survive? Could be superior combat instinct or a special bloodline. But if that's the case, why is someone like him traveling alone?" Breaking the silence, Aziz spoke in a calmer tone. "If you don't have a specific destination, may I invite you to my Burr clan?" He paused, then added sincerely, "I'll repay the favor of saving my life and escort you safely home." Tehran looked at him and asked briefly, "Repay how?" Aziz smiled warmly and explained, "Our Bantis clan are vassals of the great Arabion house in the north. Our line are artisans specializing in crafting talismans. We've forged magical weapons for generations." His eyes held quiet pride. "We will craft a perfect magical weapon, one that suits you best." Tehran sat still, absorbing every word, silently weighing the offer before him.